Can you see my slides? Great. Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are thrilled to host Jessica Jones Capparell, the League of Women Voters of U.S. Director of Government Affairs, tonight for Advocacy 101 for local leagues. And before we begin, I just wanted to review our community norms for tonight. So hopefully everyone can mute unless you're speaking. Just be respectful of others on the Zoom. And we want to be kind, be respectful, assume positive intent, bring your full self and limit distractions. Use the chat or raise hand feature to ask questions during the Q&A sections. And you can message staff with any private comments or concerns. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to be discussing federal advocacy featuring Jessica Jones Capparell, and then we'll take questions on federal advocacy. So Jessica will speak for about 15 minutes or so, and then we can take questions in the chat or via the raised hand feature for about 10 minutes. Then we're going to be speaking about state level advocacy, local advocacy, and then we'll take questions for the state and local levels. Let me stop share for a moment. So I just wanted to thank our executive director, Patty Comfort, and our League of Women Voters of Massachusetts co-presidents, Marie Gauthier and Elizabeth Foster Nolan this evening. And before we begin tonight, we did want to take a moment to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Deborah Turner, the League of Women Voters of United States board president, who passed away unexpectedly. And so we just wanted to take a moment of silence to honor her. Thank you. And let's honor her legacy with our service and determination for voting rights for all. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jessica Jones. And I'll spotlight you, Jessica. Jessica Jones Capparell is the Director of Government Affairs at the League of Women Voters of the United States. Jessica manages relationships and strategic planning for federal legislation and lobbying that benefit the organization. Additionally, she advises and assists with aligning advocacy and legislative priorities at all levels of the organization. Jessica builds strategic campaigns to impact areas of public policy, generate public support for relevant issues, lobby for policy changes through appropriate channels, and maintain current knowledge of government changes and actions. She also manages the day-to-day operations of the League's Volunteer Lobby Corps. With a decade of experience at the organization, she has become an expert on League policy positions. She works to implement strategic campaigns in coordination with staff, League members, and organizational partners around the country. In her free time, Jessica enjoys watching baseball and the WNBA, learning about wine, and watching her son learn new things. She resides in Washington, D.C. with her husband, son, and their dog, Lily. Welcome, Jessica. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so nice to be here in community with you all. And thank you so much for acknowledging Dr. Turner and the way that we will all miss her as a guiding light here in our organization. Jen, did you want me to share my screen or?
Oh, sure, I can go to your slides. Let me advance them. Can you see them? Great.
Yep.
Perfect.
We can go ahead and go to the next one. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you all about Advocacy 101, especially advocacy at the federal level. But first, I wanted to introduce my team to you all. I am only one person, and I am very, very lucky to work with some amazing people at the national office. Both the additional 4 people you see here on the screen on the advocacy team, as well as our communications staff, our litigation staff, our operations staff. They just They're amazing, and I hope that you all have a chance to interact with everyone on the LWVUS staff. But Khadijah here in the red and Brady over here hiding in the trees. They are two folks who are focused on state advocacy and helping states with policy questions. So I hope that folks will get a chance to interact with them, and if you also get a chance to interact with Kristen and Rebecca, who work primarily on our federal issues. I hope you get to do that as well. So I just wanted to make sure to introduce them because they're amazing and I'm really glad to work with them. But on the next slide, I want to just, talk a little bit about what is advocacy. So advocacy is meant to do a couple things, educate public, voters or policymakers, and that could include legislators or administrative officials on an issue or a policy. Advocacy can also influence public opinion. So that also means building support for or opposition against to a position or a policy. And it can also influence legislation, regulations, or policy. Advocacy encompasses education. It encompasses policy support or opposing an issue, and it includes lobbying. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what is advocacy versus lobbying. So first and foremost, lobbying is just one type of advocacy. It is an attempt to influence specific legislation, including legislation that's already been introduced or specific legislative proposals. Lobbying can be communication directed to a legislator, their staff, or another governmental employee in the legislative process. And that expresses a specific view on specific legislation, either supporting or opposing to pieces of it or in its entirety. Excuse me. It can be communication directed to the public that expresses a view on specific legislation, so it can go to the public as well, and directs readers to contact their legislators or includes contact information for a legislator or employee of a legislative body. It can also be communication directed to the public, and that expresses a view on a specific ballot measure. Remember, voters vote directly on ballot measures in their respective elections. So I just like to level set a little bit before we get into the nitty gritty and the details of how we set legislative priorities. So setting legislative priorities, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide. The LWVS process for setting legislative priorities begins at the staff level. The three of the people you saw on that screen, myself, Kristen, Rebecca, we take a look at the entire landscape of things that are happening at the federal government, things that we've already weighed in on, things we want to weigh in on, things we're hearing from league members that they want us to weigh in on. We take a look at the whole view, and then we make a recommendation to the LWVUS board where it's refined and approved. So by assessing the policy and political landscape, we're able to include trends and bills and policies that have been introduced, moved, or codified. We also consider several other things. Does the league have a position that supports the proposed action? Remember, without a position, we do not have the authority to act. Is there a broad member understanding and agreement? Does the league have a unique role to play or a chance to take the lead? Are other organizations or coalitions already working on this issue? Do we have partners out there? Can we bring a unique voice to a coalition? Is this the best use of the league's resources? And resources do include time and money, or would they be better spent on other activities? Is the timing right? Is action likely in the present time frame? And that's one we actually really consider because of this Congress and its interests or lack thereof. And then what kind of community involvement would best support the league's efforts? So there's lots and lots of different things that we consider when setting legislative priorities, and we encourage you all to also consider some of those things when setting your legislative priorities, both at the state and the local level. Additional considerations, what issues are most pressing to your community? What issues are we hearing from leagues about? If you perform annual surveys like the league does or like LWVUS does of your members, you can incorporate those findings, or you can review member inquiries and requests from the past legislative session. We do all of that. Well, and then we also consider the why. Why should we advocate for or against a specific policy? Is it, is it good for people? Is there a unique community we would like to work with, or we'd like to protect, or to strengthen? Where can we make the most impact? That's a big one for us. We are a small but mighty team, and we want to have the most and the biggest impact. And how much time and how many people are required and can be dedicated to this advocacy? Unfortunately, time and resources are always a consideration, but we try and pull out the stops when we can. And then also consider the number of hours per week or per month when you can partner with, and whether you already have the necessary contacts and sufficient volunteers. The LWVUS just adopted their legislative priorities at the last board meeting 2 weeks ago. And I have a link to where I can put it in the chat for you all. But the LWVUS legislative priorities for 2024 continue to be the campaign for making democracy work. And under that, there's a lot of specific little things broadly as the campaign, but we feel like we can focus both at the administrative and legislative level on voting rights protections and reforms. Money and politics. It's an election year. We're going to talk about money and politics at the legislative and administrative and campaign levels. Protecting DC autonomy. We have a Congress that is likes to use the District of Columbia as a gambling piece in their work. So we're going to work to protect DC autonomy with the League of Women Voters of DC, and supporting the 2030 census. We've had many comment periods about the data that the census wants to collect and how they want to collect it, and things, questions they want to include. There's already funding fights, so we're going to help to support the 2030 census, because we know with a good census, then we can have some fair counts and fair representation across the country. And then in addition to that, we're also going to be working on the final publication of the Equal Rights Amendment. It's been ratified by 34 different states, and Congress had passed it, 50 years ago now. So it's time for it to finally be published by the National Archivist. And then in addition to that, we have some watch list issues. Which include, we will strategically engage on legislation or administrative action around climate change, gun safety, immigration, and reproductive justice. There's not a lot of action and movement happening in this Congress right now. I think they have passed maybe 3 pieces of major legislation and have been plagued by shutdown woes or possibilities of getting a budget together. So we'll continue to push them to do what's right, but while also looking for opportunities where possible. All right. So to ensure transparency in the LWVUS process, when league affiliates request that LWVUS takes federal action on issues outside of making democracy work, we want you to know the 3 things we consider. So first one isn't this an unforeseen or an unexpected crisis? And when we're talking about emerging issues, we're talking about the watch list issues like climate change, gun safety, reproductive justice. I can't remember the other one I just mentioned, but those 4, those 4 I just mentioned. So we try to get to yes on all these questions in order to take action. Is it an unforeseen or unexpected crisis? Does this require an immediate response? And does it address a significant risk or harm to many? So these are the 3 kind of questions and things that we ask ourselves before we take action on emerging issues. Of course, all of our action is grounded in league positions. Impact on Issues is the publication that we put out every 2 years. It will come out after convention. So before anybody asks me when the new version comes out, it will come out after convention and depend on the votes or any positions that are added at convention. It's our publication. It has all of our public policy positions on national issues. And we really design it to help leagues use positions effectively at your respective levels. There is a digital copy on the league management site, and I also have a link, and I'm just not coordinated enough to put them all together right now, but I'll put some stuff in the chat and or send these over to Jen so she can share them after the presentation. Remember that our positions are adopted by league delegates every 2 years in June at the league's national convention. The program planning process is ongoing. It started in I think October of this year, and the deadline is March 10th for state and local leagues to get in their forms. So if you're interested in being a part of the program planning process, now is the time. LWVUS positions drive organization-wide work broadly and can be used by all leagues to do work at their respective levels of government. Positions help ensure that the league is implementing consistent messaging and strategy, sure that everyone is speaking with one voice. If you're working with your state league, you should also consult your state positions. And if you're with a local league, which I think most everyone is, additionally consult your local league's positions. But you can always use LWVUS positions on advocacy in your local communities. And if you need help using a position, please don't be afraid to reach out. Next slide, please. Another thing that is vitally important to our work is making sure that we apply a DEI lens to our work and in everything we do. You can find more information about how to apply a DEI lens and impact on issues. There's a whole section with I think it's 7 different questions you can ask as you're considering an issue to apply a DEI lens. And for those who aren't familiar, DEI means diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also have related resources on the league management site, including the questions to ask yourself when applying the lens and a webinar that goes through a demonstration of lens application. And there's a link in this presentation to all of our webinars, and I'll also make sure that you get it at the end. And then, as you know, the level of government follows a level of league. That's the same with the level of government advocacy that you can correspond to your level of league. So if your league wants to do federal advocacy, such as contacting people in Congress, contacting people in the White House, contacting people at any of the agencies, or anything addressing federal law or litigation, you can use this form. You can submit a federal action request form for our advocacy team to review. Those go directly to Kristen, whose face you saw on the screen, and Rebecca and I consult on those. So if you want to take action at the federal level, we ask that you fill out this form. It's very rare for us to say no, but we do sometimes like to ask questions. Federal advocacy actions may include communicating with an elected or appointed official, writing an op-ed letter to the editor about a national issue or to a national paper like the Washington Post or the New York Times, joining a national coalition, or participating in a national press conference or rally. Communication with federal officials could include joining coalitions to members of Congress or the executive branch, including federal agencies, writing your own letters to your members of Congress, or having a meeting with federal officials. And remember, all these forms of communication must be with officials who represent your jurisdiction. So we would kindly request that if your issue is in front of a committee, that you definitely work with us, because LWVUS can work to make sure that the league who belongs to a certain congressperson is also represented. And finally, I just want to highlight some resources that we have. So we do state check-ins. Khadija works directly with your state folks to do state check-ins on advocacy, on legislation, on policy matters. We also hold legislative office hours, and that's for anyone. Any league member is welcome to join. They're on the second and fourth Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. And we have a link for you to sign up. You can just go to the events calendar on the league management site. But that's where anytime you want to ask questions about policy, anytime you want to ask questions about positions, there's always at least a couple of folks from the advocacy team come join, ask your questions, and we'll get you the best answers we possibly can. We could also help you set up legislative trackings. So we do some legislative tracking for some different states around the country, helping them to track legislation, if that's of interest to anyone. And our team can help you, of course, assist you with interpreting impacts on issues, performing legislative or policy analysis, writing legislative testimony, or developing advocacy strategies. We offer numerous resources on the league management site. You can go to the tab on Making Democracy Work and click the Advocacy dropdown. And there as resources that are there include our webinars, issue-specific pages like our ERA toolkit. There's also an abortion rights state advocacy strategy that could be applied to the local level if that's of interest. And then finally, if you're not already signed up, you can join our biweekly league update newsletter for the latest information on upcoming trainings and resources, grant opportunities, and recent LWVUS actions. And for assistance with any of the support or I've discussed or any of the resources, or if you just want to ask a question, you can always reach the 5 members of that team at advocacy@lwv.org. We all check it throughout the week. And I think that's all I've got.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. That was very informative. So I welcome folks. We have 2 options. You can place your questions into the chat and Bryn can help read those. And then we can also, maybe we can alternate between, the raise hand feature and ask people to come off mute and ask their question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove your spotlight so I can see folks that have raised their hands. So let's see. So Palma, would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Hi, I do family and children issues with the LIC for the League of Massachusetts. And there are 2 bills that I've been following very, very closely in the Massachusetts legislature, and they relate to domestic violence and an updated definition of domestic violence to include coercive control, technological abuse, economic abuse, and litigation abuse. And within that, there is we got a new coalition in the last year, and all of that. But what's happening is we've been hearing from other coalitions or representatives in other states at the same time with it. So within the coalition, they have the person who actually helped pass this law in New Jersey that was just signed in January. Connecticut passed the law 2 years ago, and there are people who are talking to the coalitions up here. I've had people contact me from Tennessee and California. So at this point, you've got the environment is it's passed the Massachusetts House, but it hasn't made it to the Senate. Vermont actually passed the Vermont House, although it was on party lines, which was very weird. Anyway, so we're at a point that we're starting to see things kind of start gelling across the country. I know this then goes into national advocacy, especially because there's also a group that does it is anti-domestic violence, if that makes any sense. So what do you do about that you're starting to see things and make connections organically across the country, and how do we deal with that? Because then that goes into federal concepts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. So we do try to track ongoing legislative trends around the country. We can only track so much. But when we start to hear from leagues that are working on this issue, we do try to share resources. And a great example that's not the same issue that you're discussing, but we've had a movement to call for an Article 5 constitutional convention all across the country. And we've worked with states to help write and draft testimony. And then I save that testimony and I put it in a file. And then the next state that comes to me, I have multiple examples of how, of what other leagues have said. So this isn't an issue that I have heard outside of this call right now, but I'm happy to keep my ear to the ground and send anyone who's working on this issue your way. But I also want to say, I'm going to definitely pay attention to this and see if there's anything out there right now that I can use to help you out. I know it doesn't fully answer your question, but we do try to make the connections to folks as much as possible. If you want to be connected to the League of Women Voters of New Jersey, I'd work with your state folks to see if they can help make that connection and see if they're working on that over there.
So I should send you a quick email to remind you about this. Okay.
That'd be great.
It's going through coalitions. It's going through state. It's being introduced. It's not, we picked it up because, well, I was following domestic violence issues, but we actually have a league member out of one of our local leagues who actually started a group on it. And so we hooked into that coalition that was, that worked with the state DV organization, Jane Doe. And it's very organic and it's kind of very grassroots at this moment. And I actually have not connected with people who happen to be with the league but aren't doing it as league. If that makes any sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I will send you an email.
Palma, actually, that's a great point that you raised. So when I have a monthly check-in with Khadijah, who works with Jessica, she's also providing resources. So I say, if these are the bills that are coming up or this passed or this, she's also tracking that because she covers a certain number of states. And she has put me in touch with other states that are working on certain issues, not this particular issue, but just so you know, like those connections are happening behind the scenes too.
I'll CC you on the email.
Oh, that's okay. You don't have to. I'm just letting you know. So let's take one from the chat. Jessica, Nancy asks, any action plan to combat the use of deep fake ads and other misinformation in the 2024 election ads?
Yep. In October, we actually made some comments to the FEC on that issue. And I was just typing in the chat. There's the link to those comments. This is AI and elections is something we are very closely watching and are trying to figure out exactly how we can continue to weigh in. But this was our first kind of effort to do that. And when the FEC called for comments, so that's our first step, and we are continuing to watch for it.
Awesome, great. And Barbara, I see you have your hand raised. You can ask program planning. Is this a program planning question, Barbara? Do you want to come off mute?
It's following a little bit on Palma's question that it's hard to, I actually put it in the chat too, in case I didn't get my hand, so you can ignore it in the chat, but that it's hard to figure out state and federal. So for example, in Massachusetts, we're having a healthcare crisis that has been initiated by private equity that bought a hospital chain a few years ago, ran it into the ground, stole millions of dollars out of it, billions of dollars out of it. And then now they're saying, oh, we're gonna default. And the state is going, what? You're gonna just default on 6 hospitals at once? And that's what they're saying. Yeah, we don't have a choice. It's just, you can't run a hospital in this atmosphere, in this climate. Anyway, so this reckless firm, so that's terrible, but that's a state level issue, right? But this firm has an ACO REACH contract from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And we would like to be able to say, hey, take their contract away. We advocate that you take away your contract to these people that default on all of their agreements and so forth. And I don't know whether it seems like the national privatization position should handle that we should be able to take that away from them. but it doesn't actually say, it says that there should be a process for it, but it doesn't say what the process is. So I just wondered whether you think that the national privatization, the current privatization position would be adequate for something like that, or whether we should start discussing updating the position, the national position for that.
So I want to read the position. I haven't read it with that in mind recently, but I'm happy to read it and get back to you. I know we've communicated by email, and I'm very happy to see you tonight. So let me take a look at it, and I can get back with you.
Yeah, and but you see the difficulty of the state and the federal business.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
I
that comes up
understand.
a lot. Yeah, that comes up a lot, but it just happens to be sort of clear. And this was in the papers this morning. Everybody was going, the governor and or senator are going crazy about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Okay, so maybe one more question from the chat, Jessica. I know you have, let's see.
So Pat Clifford
Okay.
asked, what specific advocacy steps are you pursuing on the ERA publication? Is it still in the courts?
This is an excellent question, Pat. I thank you very much for asking it. So our strategy with the ERA is multi-pronged. We work very closely with the ERA coalition at the national level. Our current action alert is still directed to Congress to ask them to remove the timeline. That's a bill that has passed the House. It's come up in the Senate. There's a motion to reconsider. It might come back up in the Senate. Who knows? There's excuse me, there's also another piece of legislation that from Senator Gillibrand and Representative Cori Bush that that just basically directs the archivist to publish the amendment, says that everything has been satisfied, the timeline's not an issue. So that's something we haven't endorsed that, but we have been talking to the offices about that legislation. It's something we're considering putting out an action alert on. We also joined the ERA coalition at a march in December on the actual centennial anniversary of the ERA. We stopped at DOJ, Department of Justice, and chanted for Merrick Garland to remove. There's a memo currently that says that the memo from the Trump administration that says that it can't be published because the timeline stuff hasn't been satisfied. So we're asking the Department of Justice to remove that memo or to revise that memo to allow the publication. And then we also stopped outside of the National Archives to make sure that the archivist knew we are also interested in having her just move forward and publish it, which she said she won't do without the removal of the memo. So there's a bunch of different things that we're exploring and talking behind the scenes about, and as well as trying to keep public pressure up. And I want to just say that our action alert on the ERA is one of our most successful action alerts ever. I think it's had 16,000 letters to Congress, and just very grateful and thankful for anyone who's on this call who's joined in that call for action. Please keep sending those messages. I do believe it's still in the courts. I know one of the lawsuits got dismissed, but I am not as familiar with the court side of things as I am with the advocacy and legislation and lobbying efforts.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Jessica. We really appreciate everything you do, and your team is amazing. We love working with them. So thank you again, and take care. We hope
Thanks
to
for
see you at
having me.
convention.
I put my email in the chat, and I'll send a bunch of links over to you. But if anybody ever needs anything, please don't be afraid to reach out. If I can't answer your question, I'll try and get an answer for you. So thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Take care. Take care. Bye. Okay, so with that, we're going to turn to state level action. So I'm going to share my screen again. Great. I'll move move to state. So these are actually some of the resources that Jessica mentioned. I just put them in links. So just a reminder, we're going to be sharing this presentation, the recording, and the slides as a PDF. So you can just click on the links if you need them, or you can just email us with questions. That's no problem. But these are some of the links. So the impact on issues, the federal action request form, the action alerts that are currently out there. So the one on the ERA and among others, league basics, and also the clearinghouse for studies. So these are some of the federal resources she mentioned. Great. So now that we're turning to state action, I just wanted to review some facts about the Legislative Action Committee. So I'm so grateful that all of you are here tonight. So I'm Jen Miroff. I'm the chair of the Legislative Action Committee, and I work with a team of 22 volunteers who are specialists who drive our advocacy work. And we select and monitor about 170 bills in 20 broad areas across for each 2-year legislative session. We submit written testimony and present oral testimony during committee hearings. We suggest advocacy actions that local leagues and members can take. We organize educational events, and we are guided by the program at convention. So LWVMA's program priorities set at convention. And to recap, Jessica mentioned the LWVUS positions or impact on issues, and the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts positions are Where We Stand program book. And these are just the covers to let you know what they are. And for the Legislative Action Committee, when we choose bills for the session, so we're in a 2-year legislative session, and right now we're getting close to a big milestone, which is February 7th, which is the date that's called the Joint Rule 10 Day, which is when all close to 8,000 bills in the legislature have to be reported. So they either receive a favorable report, or they're sent a study, or they receive an extension sometimes. But just coming up next week is a pretty big deadline in the 2-year session, which I'll mention again in a moment, the schedule, but it's going to be really busy in the next week, which is great. So what we look for, we want to make sure we have a position at the US level or the Massachusetts level to support or oppose the bill. Does it have broad policy implications across the Commonwealth? Does it have strong support from coalition partners? Where can we be effective by adding our name? And we also sometimes look, what's the likelihood of passage? What was the status of the bill last session if it's been refiled this session? So those are some of the factors we talk about when we talk about which bills we're going to support for this session. So some quick facts about the Massachusetts legislature. It's a 2-year term for both senators and representatives. There are 200 members, 160 representatives, and 40 senators. We are one of 10 full-time legislatures nationwide. The current formal session ends July 31st, 2024, and any actions taken after this date require unanimous consent. As mentioned, close to 8,000 bills have been filed for this session, and the new session will begin in January 2025. So this is where you can find the bills that we support this session. If you go to lwvma.org/advocacy, you can scroll down and see all the specialists and the topic area they cover. On the left-hand side where you see the bill numbers, you can link to those bills. You can also view and download the summary of what the bill is about. And you can see our written testimony that we submitted to the joint committees. We submit our written testimony to the joint committees and post it here on the website. If you'd like to download it or read it there, you can see them all. Scroll down. So when local leagues want to act on state level bills, there's a process for that, and we're going to have a couple of special guests tonight. But I just wanted to mention the process first. So this policy is posted to our website. And basically, if a local league wants to act on a bill that's in the Massachusetts legislature that the LAC hasn't already supported, this is the process that, that they would go through. So does LWVUS, LWVMA, or your local league have a position to support or oppose the bill? And then you would discuss it with your local league board to get approval. And then you would contact the LAC chair. You would prepare a legislative research sheet, an LRS it's called, and we can work with you on all of these questions and steps, no problem. And then the Legislative Action Committee votes to support local league efforts. The local league can offer oral or written testimony to the joint committee and post to its website, and the specialists are always available for guidance. So at this point, I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to ask Sue Brock from League of Women Voters of Cape Cod to share her experience. There you are, Sue. If you want to unmute, I can spotlight you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I just want to briefly tell you about our local league experience dealing with the bill that the state league did not pick up for coverage. And that was Bill HD 4555, an act relative to restoring commuter rail service to Cape Cod. The bill's purpose is to extend the commuter rail service from South Station in Boston to Buzzards Bay within 12 months of passage of the bill, if the bill passes. And it also proposes a feasibility study to establish year-round daily rail service between the towns of Falmouth, Bourne, Barnstable, Hyannis, Yarmouth, and Sandwich, between those communities and the city of Boston. The bill was filed late, August 30th, 2023, in this second year session by Dylan Fernandez, and he represents Barnstable, Dukes, and the Nantucket District. Our league was actually contacted by the Falmouth League, which falls within Representative Fernandez district, and notified us about the bill and asked us if we would work together in order to see if we could get permission to advocate for the passage of this bill. So after having a couple of dialogues with the Falmouth League and our board, we decided that we would be interested in pushing for passage of this bill. And so we contacted the State Legislative Action Committee and asked about the process. And the first thing we had to do was fill out the legislative research sheet, which is basically a questionnaire that asked for information about the bill, whether or not there's issues about funding, equity, timeliness, how the bill may impact the communities. And that bill, that legislative research sheet was filled out and sent to the Legislative Action Committee, which reviewed it, and then they contacted me, and I actually had a meeting with the Legislative Action Committee and answered any questions that they had regarding the resources that we had in terms of members and willingness to support this. And they voted to approve it and gave us the go-ahead. And so since then, we've been in communication with the Joint Committee of Transportation, where the bill is sitting, and with Representatives Fernandez and Vieira, who is in that section, the representative, another representative that is sponsored the bill as well. And we've written testimony and delivered that testimony before the hearing when the bill came up. So the process is not difficult. The State League is very supportive, and I recommend that if any of you have any issues that you need to do to deal with this in the same way, just contact Jen and she'll walk you through it.
Great, thank you, Sue. Right, so this is a bill that's in the state legislature that affects your local league or region. Thank you, Nancy, for the clarification. And as Jessica said, the level of government follows the level of league. So this issue is important to the local league, but it's not a statewide issue. It's not, right, but it is a state level bill. So thank you, Sue. Mm-hmm. Great. And now I'm going to ask Linda Zifrin to share her experience. Linda is from Concord, Carlisle.
Great. Would you like to share the slides too?
Sure.
Oh, that way I know what I'm talking about.
There we go.
And
okay.
So I'm sort of a novice at this, and there are so many of you that have been that are expert at it. But an example is a home rule petition, and probably a lot of you have home rule petitions that you're dealing with, and used our fun time with the real estate transfer fee. So the first thing to make sure I'm on top of everything is to sign up to track the bills, and I have a slide that'll show you where you do that on massledge.gov. When the bill gets a hearing, you get a notice, so you get a notification right away, and they don't give you a lot of time. So it's all of a sudden, you know, you're moving quickly to get everybody notified. So as soon as you get the note, I got the notice, I would send it out to our board and our spokesperson and the respective committee chairs if it was something that impacted the committee. And of course, our housing issues was certainly part of that, to see if they were interested in submitting testimony. And I also, at the same time, notified Jen, hey, this is coming up in the testimony. The date for testimony is, you know, such and such a date, and filled out the legislative, you know, the LRS, talking about the history of how you know, we came to support it and what was going on. Then she turns things around really quickly. So don't let the short time frame stop you. And they approved it, and then we submitted testimony. And what was really nice is that she also helped fine tune it so that we had more punch and it was effective. And then it's either you submit the testimony or you sign up to testify. And then on top of that, we use Outreach Circle, which is now known as League in Action. And then so I would set up an action with sample calls, scripts, and phone numbers, and to call our state reps or senator, and an email and a way to share it with others so that they would have a volume of folks saying, yes, let's do this. And then the next slide is, this is what it looks like on MassLedge to sign up. So if you see the cute little guy at the top, or I don't know, the over in the dark blue banner, if you click on that, when it's a live link, that's where you sign up, and you sign up for MyLedge or My Legislature, and name and address, email. And then you can pick bills that you want to follow. And so if you see Bill H2330, which is our real estate transfer fee, if the star next to it is gray, if you click on that, then it says that's one of the bills I want to follow. And so that will, the system then will notify you when it is scheduled for a hearing or when something's happening with the bill. So, and then the next slide. So I learned some lessons, which is, and you all know this anyway, which is that first, generally with a home rule petition, it's got to pass at town meeting. So if you know, the league will hold, our league holds warrant article reviews. And then when we take positions, you know, supporting or opposing based on league positions, it tracked the rationale at that point, because if it passes, then you already have some of the history to fill out the LRS, and you have some of the rationale. And as Jen mentioned, January is a new legislature year. Well, next January. So the first January of the year, start look when the bills are filed so that you can start putting, you know, highlighting the ones that you want to track. So you have a head start on it. And then, you know, talk with your state reps and senators, and I mean, you all know this, and the various town committees that are impacted by it. So we're all on the same line. And what happened is, because we, we have Stefan Bader, who is he's also very involved with housing in town and on a town committee. one of our state reps asked if he would be on a panel when this came up to provide testimony. And so, that was good that he did. And of course, it was testimony that we ran back past Jen and group. And it was also on the Day in the Hill. So it was a great twofer. And then following up, so we had our state reps come to our January town government committee meeting, so we could continue to ask them, where do things stand and what's the likelihood? So they know that we're on top of it. And that's pretty much it, I think.
Great, thanks, Linda. Great. So how can members, pardon me, how can members of a local league or just a member of the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts take action on state bills? You can join the Envoy program, and I'll introduce Mary in one moment to talk about the Envoy program. Mary Cummings is our Envoy coordinator. You can take action via the monthly action newsletter. It's coming out on February 1st. You can respond to action alerts ramped up at key dates. As mentioned, there's a lot of action at the State House now. In the next week, we sent out an action alert yesterday regarding the Senate firearms bill. So you'll be getting action alerts to take action and call your legislators. You can invite a legislative specialist to speak on a topic who can offer ways to take action on state issues. And you can join an issue area email group for updates. So I'm going to stop share for a minute. I just wanted to introduce everyone to Mary Cummings, who's our Envoy coordinator. Mary, I'll spotlight you for everyone. I think you're muted. Yep.
Yeah, I thought I had unmuted me. And then I had a paper with some notes. There it is, so that I can make sure I get everything that I wanted to say in. What we're looking for is to have an envoy from each local league. And that envoy represents all the members of that league, that local league, in a relationship with the legislators. So the envoy would establish and maintain a relationship with the legislators and make sure that they know exactly what bills the league is looking at and what they want the legislator to do about it. And they can, let me just check to make sure I didn't forget something. We need to know generally what our issues and priorities are, and specifically what bills are on the table that we're interested in. They should also keep the members of their local league informed about what's going on. And especially if you have a league that has several districts involved, that means you have several different legislators. So you don't have all the same senators and representatives. So it's important to get the other members of your local league to call their legislators and pass on the information that we want you to do this about this bill. One of the greatest things about it is that you get to have meetings with the specialists, and you can access the specialists and ask them questions about one of the bills that might come up, one of the actions that comes up. If you're an envoy, and you also can ask about the general area. The specialists are sitting in on those meetings is the most incredible thing I've ever done in the league, and I've been in the league for nearly 50 years. These women are outstanding. They impress me every single month that I meet with them. And you will not be disappointed if you go to them and ask for some information. So that is, I don't think we have every league covered at this point, so we would like to get a few more envoys in. And especially envoys that have legislators who are on committees that have to do with the bills that are our priorities. So that's the envoy program.
Great, thanks, Mary. And I'll put your contact information in the resources. Thank you. Great, and now I'll go back to my share screen for my slides. Thank you. Great. So how can local leagues take action at their local league level with LWVMA and LWVUS positions? So Linda mentioned town meeting articles. We get a lot of questions about town meeting articles. Plymouth and Cape Cod worked on nuclear safety issues at the local level. You could, I know some leagues contacted us about opposing the use of artificial turf at their schools because it contains PFAS. You can educate voters. I think LWV Brookline was educating their voters on the MBTA communities law. So there are a lot of ways that local leagues can use Massachusetts and US positions to take action at their local league level. And we're always available to answer those questions. So if you're looking in where we stand or impact on issues and you're not sure, please contact us. We're happy to help you. So you may want to, you may notice that you don't have a position at your local league level and you want to take action on something. So when you adopt a new position at your local league, this occurs at your annual meeting. I'm a local league member of Needham, and our annual meeting is usually May and June. It's when our annual meeting takes place. You have two options. You can conduct a study and reach consensus on your position, or you can adopt a position by concurrence. And that's adopt an applicable position by concurrence and be sure you have member agreement and understanding on the issue. And for more depth, I really recommend, this is an oldie but goodie, League Basics. It's pretty old. I think the copyright is from the early 2000s, but an oldie but a goodie. It's a great resource to just go through, what does consensus even mean? What does concurrence mean? What are all these terms I haven't heard of before? Definitely refer to League Basics. And you can refer to the LWVMA bylaws on page 9. It's pretty detailed about concurrence and consensus, and your local league bylaws. So our local league bylaws in Needham are posted to our website, but they're also in our member booklet and provided before annual meeting as well. Another option would be you could recommend that LWVMA adopt a new position by submitting a request during program planning. So that would be for January 2025 for Convention 25. If you see a state position that you want our state to adopt, that would happen during that process. Oh, sorry, was I muted? Sorry about that. So this is League Basics, and it just shows you overview of program and all the lingo there. So you can also develop your own position at the local league level, which I mentioned about a study. So I just wanted to ask Linda to come back to share her experience about the study and position on Hanscom. I'm going to stop my share.
Well, I wasn't around when we did the study, but what was nice, so it was many of you know that Hanscom is trying to expand, and this was not the first time. The current time is not the first time they tried to do this earlier, and so our league didn't have a position on it and did a study. Took it to the annual meeting, got consensus, and so we now have the positions that you saw on the slide about Hanscom. So last year when activity started up and on Hanscom to expand the with hangars, etc., we had the positions all ready to rock and roll. Which is really nice. And so the board was able to meet quickly and go, yes, we support it, and collaborated, because there were so many other towns around us as well that are impacted by it, and other organizations. So it made things easy, and it's published, and we're there advocating then to oppose the expansion.
Excellent. Thank you, Linda. So I just wanted to show folks. So on the LWV Concord Carlisle, you can see their positions and their Hanscom position. And then this is also a wonderful one. League of Women Voters of Falmouth adopted a new transportation position. And I just wanted to share that as an example. And then we have a ton of resources to share, which I will send you all these slides and post them to our website as well. So now's the time we can take questions on state and local action. I think there was a question in the chat. Let me just see. Diana asks, can a league concur during the year if not prepared to do so at annual meeting? Historically, your program is developed at annual meetings, so concurrences occur at annual meeting at the local and state level. So it is during your annual meeting to adopt a concurrence. Would anyone like to put a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and come off mute and ask your question? Barbara?
Me again. It's not about healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very interested to see that Vermont changed their bylaws so that they could call a convention, a state convention, when they needed one.
Wow.
And they didn't have to wait. And so now they can do that. But none of us can. But I wonder whether it would be worthwhile for us to even think about it. And that way, if, for example, one of the bills that Linda or one of the others was talking about didn't want to wait a year and a half just to get concurred, could conceivably.
Oh, for their local league?
Yeah.
I'm not
So
sure.
for
I'd
a
have to
state
read.
position, for a state
For a
position.
state position. I think we can only amend our bylaws at convention now, correct, Elizabeth?
That's what they did. They did it
Yeah.
at convention. So they
Got it.
can't do it
Okay.
before the next convention.
Right, right, got it.
But then they can, that might be a good thing to try to do. It might be useful for the state.
Oh, we'll mention it during program planning, January 2025, right?
Right, got it.
Nancy?
Just wanted to clear up one thing that I think is a misconception here.
Mhm.
You don't have to concur with a state position. You can use that without concurring with it. You know, a local league in Massachusetts can use a Massachusetts state position to take action. You don't have to
Correct.
concur with it. It's already a position you can use. And I'm not sure that wasn't what Diana might have been asking, or Barbara either. A concurrence would be to cover something that you currently don't have a position on at either the
Right.
state or local level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was
So,
thinking for another state, for example, to confer with another state.
yeah,
A position from
a
another
position with
state,
another
she's
state,
asking.
you can't use that, but you can use any Massachusetts position to
Mhm.
take action in Massachusetts.
Great, Palma?
I will tell you, 2 years ago, Massachusetts actually adopted a Rhode Island position on libraries by concurrence at our annual meeting. So and that's okay.
Oh, you mean
too.
Boston? You mean Boston?
Boston, the Boston League. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Which put it on the chart for program planning in 2025. This is also this might be actually kind of theoretical, but also it was something I actually don't know the answer to. We talk about doing studies at state or local level, but there are some issues. And the one that's coming to my mind right now is Boston Harbor, which works out as a good issue to explain this. There are several communities covered by different leagues that border the greater Boston Harbor. Is there, or would there be, or is this something for program planning in 2025, any kind of provision for, say, all of the communities, if there were, say, 3 leagues that bordered Boston Harbor, to cooperate and do almost a regional position on something regional like that? I don't know if it's a question. I don't know if it's an answer. It's just a thought that
Actually, I've heard of that at the Great Lakes region. I've heard of those leagues banding together on natural resources in this
Yeah.
in the Great Lakes region. So I have heard of regions taking action. So first, so if a local league wants to take action and they check Massachusetts where we stand and they check impact on issues and they don't see that they have a position and they contact us and we don't see a position and they would like to either adopt a position from another league by concurrence, or they want to embark upon a study, those are the options. So I just wanted to recap. But yes, regional is an option, Palma. Yes.
Yeah. Boston actually has a position that I think needs to be redone, which is on Boston Harbor. But because of technological and various other type of things, any position we take would actually kind of start bumping up against other leagues, if that makes any sense. So even though the Berkshires isn't going to be too concerned about, say, waterfront usage on Boston Harbor, so that's what I was kind of thinking. As I said, it's just very, in my mind right now, it's theoretical, but it's something I kind of put out there.
I think it's a good point to raise, and I've seen it in other states. So yes, for sure. Okay. Nancy Brumback, did I forget anything or any more clarifications? Okay. Are there any other questions? Anything we can help you with? Okay, with that, I will say good night. Thank you for attending and take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jen.